evening, everyone, and welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Misha Kent. You can find me on all social media, but that's not important. What you should do is go follow St. Pete by Night on all of the social medias listed down below and in the descriptions on Twitch and YouTube and wherever your favorite podcasts are found. I've been harping on this for the last couple of streams, but we are in a podcast form now. So if you are not caught up on all of our incredible stories, if you're not caught up on these amazing After Dark conversations that we've had, you can do so by going to your favorite podcast provider and looking for St. Pete by Night. And then you can subscribe, download, or stream all of those episodes, including on Spotify. So if you want to listen to us in the car or during your work day or while you're cleaning around the house, there is an option available to you if you can't keep up in the video format. So go check that out. This is After Dark because it is Saturday night. And on After Dark, we talk to a lot of the people behind the scenes that make St. Pete by Night, as well as the World of Darkness, what it is. We talk to storytellers, we talk to players, we talk to influencers, and we talk to creators who make the World of Darkness as amazing as it is. And tonight we have the very, very special privilege of talking to one of our incredible partnered vendors who help make St. Pete by Night a reality, help keeping the lights on and keeping us functioning because of their support. The creator we are talking to tonight is Dragon Ink Dice, one of the amazing, amazing dice manufacturers who helps supply our community with incredible sets of dice. And I am very, very, very happy to say that tonight we are also doing a very special giveaway from Dragon Ink Dice. That's right, with the hashtag DiceMePlease in the chat throughout the whole evening, you can win that very set of dice that you see on screen right now from Dragon Ink Dice. They are absolutely gorgeous, and I have had the privilege of holding some of Dragon Ink Dice's dice in my hands, and I can tell you they are top-notch quality, and you will love this set of dice, and you can get it for free tonight by just putting the hashtag DiceMePlease in the chat, which will give you the opportunity to be in the running for that set of dice. But without further ado, let's say hello to Katy, the creator, the magician who makes Dragon Ink Dice a possibility. Katy, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello. Well, like you said, I'm Katy. Some people call me Scryer because of my Twitch streaming days. It was an odd name that I went by that made no sense with what I did. I've been doing this for a few years now. Yeah.
And I'm
I
excited.
basically.
I'm so excited to get
Yeah.
into all of that. Uh,
Mhm.
so we're going to talk about not just your involvement in the dice making process, which I think will be a majority of this conversation,
Mhm.
because I just love all of the science that goes into this, not to mention the creativity. I mean, we saw with some of those dice in your shop that you can do such incredible things in this medium to bring
Oh
that
yeah.
creativity to life. And I'm excited to break down how that happens. But what I'm also excited to talk about is how you got into TTRPGs and gaming as a whole. I mean, there's always an interesting story that brings people to this hobby, and the fact that people can take not just the hobby itself, but turn it into a career or turn it into an artistic endeavor is so fascinating as well. So why don't we start there? How did you discover TTRPGs, and what about it appealed to you? Did you have any preconceived notions going into it or any reputation about it? And then what made you decide to take the plunge into it?
So it's actually interesting. My first delve into TTRPGs was actually a growing hatred for it because it was my father's thing to do. And
Really?
Yeah. My earliest memory of it was hiding under a card table in my parents' living room as everyone was just playing that and not being able to do anything else because that's what they were doing. And until I was about 23, I was against ever touching one because that's what they did, not me.
So that's so fascinating to me because, gaming
Mhm.
can be a generational thing, but I've often found that people have found it because they weren't into sports like their parents were, or they weren't into, whatever their parents were into. But you had the opposite effect where
Yeah.
you're they were into it, but then you ended up getting a really bad taste in your mouth because of it and would hold off
Yes.
on plunging into it for 2 decades, over 2 decades before you leapt into it. That is so interesting to me. So
Yeah.
what was it that made you decide to take the leap? When did you say, okay,
Um,
I'm going to try this for myself?
so it actually is because of him also. I went down to Texas after I graduated college, and he was going there every week DMing for a group. And I was like, now hold on, I can help you make fun puzzles. I can help you write strange riddles for people. And so I was helping him do that. And then we did a one shot of oh, some game I have not heard of again since then. And I remember somebody died in the session immediately on introducing their character because a bag of nuts exploded. Uh, it was interesting. And then I didn't touch it again for a while because I went back home and we weren't playing it at all.
That's so
And
that's just so
yeah,
incredible to me. Like to see people getting into it, so much later in life, especially having been around it so much, but it
mhm,
totally makes sense because it's like, oh, that's what my parents do. That's not my
that's not
my
my thing.
thing. So
My
what
thing
were
was
you into?
music.
Okay, music. What kinds of music did you like?
Uh, you know, just generic pop, whatever was on the radio at the time. Got really into jazz because I was part of a vocal jazz group in high school and thought that that's what I was going to do with my life. Surprise? I'm
So,
not. I am not on the next big singer,
lo and behold,
but
the thing that you were avoiding all of your life has now become
is
your
now my
life's
thing.
work.
Yes.
That's absolutely amazing. So when you did actually, rather than try it, jump into it, was D&D kind of your starting game or your starting platform?
Yeah. So this whole thing is very convoluted because I didn't actually get into a D&D game until 2 years after I started making dice.
Oh, really? Okay, so the
Yeah,
dice came
the
first, the
dice came
gaming.
first.
Okay, all right. What about dice making appealed to you, and how did you find your way into that?
Okay, big story.
Let's hear it.
2020 is the answer,
Okay.
overarching. I had just quit my full-time job to go work at a bookstore because I didn't wanna work at a thrift store anymore. It was not fun, and I had been there for less than a couple months when everything closed down. They're like, "Well, you don't get to stay on our pay." And at the time, I had started deep diving into researching other people's dice making at the time, and I'd just been reading on Facebook all of the different techniques, watching every video I could find, looking at every photo. I still have so many of them saved on my phone from back then. And at that same exact time, once again with my dad, we had started up a different Twitch group called the Dice Cult. And I was like, well, I can make dice for them. I just have to get masters made. I just have to go full force and I can do it. And so I did.
Speaking of the Dice Cult, I want to give them a big shout out as one of the plugs for you this evening. They do have a Twitch channel here on
You do.
Twitch, and you can find them at twitch.tv/ the Dice Cult, all one word.
Mhm.
And your company is actually listed as one of the artwork companies on that
Mhm.
page. So go give them some support and love as well, because it does help support our amazing guest here tonight.
Yes. It does. If
So
you want to see me with really intricate ice makeup every Monday, because my character's dying from an ice curse right now. Uh,
that is so cool. So you also do cosplay to a certain degree as well.
it. I find that dressing up for my character helps me be them. So, like for my St. Pete character, I have a wig. I have a different pair of glasses I wear. Uh, a different voice. She has this egg pillow.
I love that kind of commitment. especially to just the craft, because I do think
Mhm.
of role playing as a craft. It is a
Yeah.
performance art, and I love that people, will lean so far into it because it does create an immersive experience, not just for me as a player. Like I usually have different costumes for the different NPCs that I'll play at certain times,
Mhm.
but also, for other players as well to have some sort of visual. I
The
think it
visual's
helps.
nice.
I think it helps. Yeah, I think it helps get them into the scene and into the moment. And so I
Mhm.
think that's fantastic. So starting with D&D, and so this was after the pandemic, or at least a good
Right.
solid chunk into it that you decided to pick it up. What was your first class that you played?
It is the same one. I started as a level 12 Circle of Spores druid.
Oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
I
That's
had to
that's
learn.
diving in the deep end too. That's not a simple class.
No, there's a lot of spells to learn at level 12.
Mm-hmm. And did
And
you have a difficult time like learning all those mechanics, or did some of the
no,
knowledge that you had been taught, even just overhearing it as a kid, kind of stick and allow you to be able to adapt to it quickly?
uh, so this was about 100 sessions into the campaign that I joined, and
Wow,
I
okay.
had listened to every session leading up to it. So I kind of got a majority of it. There's some weird druid things that I still don't 100% always know. But
There's a
like
lot of
overall,
mechanics.
there's so many mechanics. But for the most part, and I've also got it down that you just ask if you can do a thing and see if they say yes, even if you shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and they'll be able to at least tell you what they require of you to be able
Mhm.
to do that thing.
Right.
What
Or if they'll
made
just rule cool.
what made you look into Vampire the Masquerade or World of Darkness? What kind of was the transitioning point there?
So that was actually my brother wanted to run a campaign for World of Darkness. And so he has all the books, and I was looking at them, and we played a singular session where I played a Bruja that immediately on chatting with Sarah was like, we really got to take down these cams. Like, you are part of this Anarch revolt. we,
Immediately
we,
anarch.
we need to do this. And then also Dice Cold related, they were starting up a vampire campaign, and one of my friends on there was like, "You should really ask the storyteller if you can hop in because there's a spot open." And I was like, "I don't know if I should," and then I did, and we got through the whole thing. I destroyed every car that I ever drove, um, which carried over to this campaign. The only car to the server, the only car Vivian has driven is no longer functional.
So when you joined the server, you came in as part of a package group of others. Are they also people who
Yeah.
belong to the Dice cult, or is it just people you gathered
Yeah.
along the way? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was all of us that had been part of that Dice Cult vampire game. We were all like, "We wanna play another one."
Well, and I was
And
super impressed when you guys came in because you gave like video references. You all came in as a package deal. You had this idea for a coterie all put together on all your characters. And
mhm,
your character specifically is Vivian Pigeon Flynn. Now, what
yes.
can you tell me about that character for people who are watching?
Vivian is, she's an Alcavian. Uh, she a lot of it draws on different aspects of myself. Like, she loves crafting. I pushed it to an extreme level for her. She is very scatterbrained, has every job she can think of that to join. Uh, has one at the coffee shop, the hospital, the red salon, and is looking for more. Probably would be doing Uber Eats and things like that, but the car situation is no longer working.
And
It,
what has been, or what was your favorite part of that story, or was there a favorite moment that you had in that story that you'd like to share?
oh goodness, for her, she is. Hmm. One of the first things she did was stole the entire box of name tags from the coffee shop because they're necessary. I need them.
Of course.
You never know.
You never know.
And I proceeded to hand them out to people as
Amazing.
token of friendship. And
Amazing.
one of our group members, when they joined, she did not earn a name tag.
Ooh, so it wasn't friendship right out the gate
Was
there.
not friendship.
It's very, very opposing forces.
So
It
if you guys talk to Aurora or Dr. Alex, they both have name tags.
amazing. That is amazing. What is a clan that you've been interested in but haven't had the opportunity to play yet and would enjoy playing?
I think I would really enjoy trying out the Tremere because I
Okay.
know that there's a lot of different avenues you can go with them, and I really like deep diving into lore, and I know that there's a lot that I can
They have a
learn.
very extensive lore.
They
Yes,
have
it's.
so much going on.
I would even deign to say that the Tremere, even though they are a controversial clan to say the
They
least,
are.
people either love them or they hate them. There's not really a middle ground there. They are
Mhm.
also one of the more fleshed out clans, one of the clans that has one of the deepest and richest histories and lores, and their wide range of abilities make them very versatile and are very keen to being played by people who like to play casters in D&D because of all the
Mm,
magic and rituals and everything they can do. But I do think they are also one of the more complicated clans to play
yeah.
because there is not just the disciplines and abilities. There's all these rituals and all these other things they can do. But it is one of the clans that has always been one of the more fleshed out clans.
Mhm.
So when did you first heard of World of Darkness? Because of your friend, because of the
Yeah.
dice cult? What about it? How would you compare it to other games that you've played? What do you think of it in like what appeals to you most about this system specifically?
I think it's more because it feels more real because of the setting it's based in. I can see that like this weird thing going on. I can reason like, oh, where I could see that in real life. These weird gatherings of people and be like, well, I see weird gatherings all the time. I used to live in Chicago. That's strangely normal. And then you throw in this world, it's like, but it's because they're vampires.
Yeah, there's just that
or
extra layer that's laid
uh-huh.
over it. And I think that and I've talked about this so many times. I see the world differently after playing this game
Hmm.
because I'm just like, "Oh, those are Malkavians or those are Toreador.
Yeah,
Or this is, this would be an Elysium or whatever the case may be."
exactly.
So you came in as a hospital coterie. Where did the idea to have this coterie based around a hospital come from? What was the motivation behind that? Because I thought that was so fascinating and interesting that that was like the direction you guys knew you wanted to go from the get-go.
Was a lot of what the Ventrue characters were interested in. They wanted something where it made sense for all of us to be able to be there.
Okay.
So, uh, a hospital is a place where it makes sense for, well, technically Vivian is also a nurse. I forgot that.
It's one of the many, the list,
One
the
of her,
resume of jobs.
she's got a lot going on. So
That's
technically she had two jobs in the hospital. Let's be specific. Uh, and then we had somebody who did more admin, and we had priest work, and it was just it's a place where you could have a lot of different things going on, and it's very central.
well, and I think that's such a cool idea that you saved the storyteller so much work because one of the
Mhm.
biggest things about being a storyteller is like how do I bring all these people together, like what's going to be the
Yeah,
connective tissue to bring the group together, and you guys were like we're here, we go, we already have it,
we're
we've already
here.
thought of that, we already fleshed that all out, we've got the relationships defined and put
Mhm.
together. I think that is so cool. Have you ever thought about storytelling yourself? Have you ever had any interest or any desire to be a storyteller?
I waffle on it. Like, I think that it would be fun, but also I'm one of those people that would want to have every single thing prepared possible, and I know that's not possible as a storyteller at all. And so I'd have to make myself sit there and learn that I can't prepare and that I have to be able to do things on the fly, and it's just going to be the case immediately.
Oh, absolutely. No, all the preparation in the world can't get
Yeah,
you
it
ready
does nothing.
for one decision one player makes can completely throw an
Nah,
entire, section of it out the window. Have you ever run any games, not just Vampire the Masquerade, but like any games whatsoever? D&D,
I
nothing.
I have not.
Okay, okay. I'd be interested. I'd be interested to see your take on, running a game and what kind of style game you would want to run. Have you explored any of the other World of Darkness material, like Werewolf, Mage, Wraith, Changeling, anything like that? Or do any of those appeal to you outside of Vampire?
I haven't read any official books. I've done a lot of just random reading the wikis. So I know small bits and things. I think I'd mostly want to learn more about Hunter
Okay.
now. Just go the complete opposite end.
Yeah. One, I think Hunter is also it's very accessible because it's something we can all
Mhm.
relate to if you're a fan of Supernatural or Buffy the
Yeah,
Vampire Slayer or anything like that. But also, they're humans, and that's something that
yeah.
we can also relate to because that's obviously the closest thing to what we are is it's humans, and the idea of monster hunting always provides interesting adventures that you can go on. Whereas, like, we're never, for
Mhm.
the most part, most of us are never going to know what it is to be a vampire or a werewolf or anything like that. But a hunter, you can put yourself in that mindset and really build a character that's grounded and based off of reality in that as
Mhm.
well. So, talking more about the dice making, were you into any other artistic hobbies growing up? Did you always
Oh,
consider
yeah.
yourself to be very artsy and like really into crafting?
Yeah, for sure. Very much was one of the people that would start any kind of craft. Have not finished many, but I used to draw a lot when I was younger. Like I had all the really fancy colored pencils, took art classes in high school, and I have a like 30 plus page cross stitch in the other room I've been working on for way too long. Uh, I knitting, all the things.
So how do you get started getting into dice making? Because I totally understand like seeing other people's products and being very interested in it, but how did you
Mhm.
actually get into the process of making dice, and where do you kind of start with something like that? Because from everything I've heard,
Mhm.
you need certain equipment, you need materials and chemicals and all this kind of extra stuff. So what was your starting point? How did you really get into it?
So, learning what I needed, there's this I don't know if I'd call him a dice maker anymore because he's slowed down, but a guy named the Ribinator on YouTube who did a ton of tutorials and shared everything that he used to make dice. And so I looked into that and immediately was like, okay, this is the list of things that I need to order. And got uh, packs of nitrile gloves, which was really hard at the time because it was during the pandemic and you could not get them.
Oh, for sure. For
It
sure.
was it was a choice. There's actually a thing called like uh rubber gloves or so, it's like almost a lotion that you put on. It's terrible and I will never touch that again. It technically works, but I don't recommend it. So I had to get those. You need obviously the resin to pour it, and I went through many brands before I found one that I actually liked because they're all different. And get I needed to get a table space for it, so I just started with a tiny 2-foot table that was my entire area for a while. Silicone to make my own molds. I reached out to a person that specialized in 3D printing master dice and picked out a font, made my logo, and I also have the Dice Cult logo on another set of dice. And then from there, had to get those, sand and polish those, which is a whole nother mess. Learning to sand and polish, so you need specialty papers I use that are called Zona papers. They're like 6 different colors. They go from grits that are like, oh, 3,000 microns down to 1 micron.
Wow.
And
So I want to show off some of your work here while we're talking.
yeah,
But it seems like it'd be a very expensive
yes, it
hobby to get
is.
into, let alone to make it a
Uh,
profession. Were you able to test out the process first, or did you just kind of leap in head first and say, "Well, I'm going to sink the money into it anyway. I might as well go full in," or were you
uh,
able to work with some stuff first before committing to it?
I went full in.
Okay. So you bought
I
all the stuff you need right
I
out the
bought
gate.
everything
Oh, wow.
immediately.
Wow. I know that there's a lot of trial and error. Like, I
Yes.
remember having done TikTok lives with Wolfpack Dice, and he had a
Mhm.
huge, big bucket full of duds of just
Oh,
trials that
yeah.
he had run through and that just didn't work out, and he ended up
I
having
have a
to dump.
bag over there, that's my duds.
So, how many sets, or what was your first set like? What did you feel about your first set?
Oh. Oh, actually, my first set was not with the masters that I currently use. I bought different masters from somebody else that were really bad quality, and so those were very chunky. I thought they were beautiful at the time. Um, they were very simple, white and black, pour with a little bit of red, foil in them, and I still like them.
Well,
They
you gotta love them. The first ones you created, like even if
they're
they're
the
not as
first
perfect as
ones.
you thought they'd be, like they're the first, and they started this crazy road you've gone down
Mhm.
since. So
Uh,
you've also gotten to the point now that you travel to conventions
yes.
to be a vendor to sell these dice. How many conventions have you been to so far, and what would you say is your favorite?
Oh, geez. You know what? I actually have that information right in front of me because I
Sure.
have Google Drive in front of
Yeah.
me, my conventions tab. So I've done one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, 10. What? Sorry, in 2022 I did six. Last year I did eight. This year so far I'm scheduled for six.
Wow.
Two
That's
that have already happened.
That's amazing, especially since you really only got into this during the pandemic, but you're
Yeah.
already traveling, you're already
Oh
selling
yeah.
dice sets. What is the furthest you've traveled so far because of dice? Like, what's the furthest convention you've been to?
My furthest ones have been down in Atlanta, so I'm based in central Illinois, so it's like a 10-ish hour drive for me.
Oh, wow. So, and you
Yeah.
drove all the way to Atlanta.
Oh
And
yeah.
which convention was that?
uh, they have one called Southern Fried Gaming Expo that I've done twice, and MomoCon that I'm going to have done twice in a couple weeks.
Oh, that's incredible. And we were talking before we went live, and you said you have like back to
Yeah.
back
Yep.
conventions coming up here. Which conventions are those? Where can people see you over the
Uh,
next few weeks?
yeah. So this coming weekend, the 17th through 19th, I'll be at Anime Central, which is in Rosemont, Chicago. And then the following weekend, the 24th through 27th, I will be down in Atlanta for MomoCon.
Oh, wow,
So
that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
it's going to be a lot. But
And what's the average time it takes to make a set of dice? Going from the very beginning to, designing a concept or coming up
mhm.
with an idea to executing it to it being completely finished and ready to sell or ship. How long does that take for, let's just say, a single set of dice?
So I don't know active work time. What I do is I work in bigger batches to save my hands and shoulders so that I can function as a human.
That makes sense.
So it takes me about a month to get a set done.
Okay. But you get
Yeah.
several sets done at the same
Yeah.
time. So you're just going through the
Yes.
process with all of them rather
Hmm.
than just working on a single set from the beginning to the
Yeah.
end. It's okay. Well, that seems like a smart way to do it to mass produce them. What take us through the process step by step? I think a lot of people are fascinated how the sausage gets made
Mm.
in this case, myself included, because there's a lot of balancing and chemistry work that's involved, and you have to put it in, I think, a pressurizer. I don't even know what the,
Yes.
but let's go through the entire process because it's just
Yeah.
absolutely incredible to me.
So do we want a regular set of dice or a more inclusive one, like with my blank sets that are more detailed?
Let's go with a regular set of dice to start, and
Regular
then we
set of
can hear what
dice.
additional steps go into the more
Got it.
specific.
Got it. So, something like the one I'm giving away today. What I would do is I sit down, I think about, okay, what colors do I want to mess with? Pick Sometimes I'll take them out ahead of time, sometimes I won't because art is chaos. in general.
It really is, yeah.
So I typically have all of my molds sitting out already because that's just where they live until they are no longer functional. I'll pull those out. I usually mix up about a cup worth of resin at a time, 8 ounces, depends. What I do is it's a two-part epoxy, so you have to pour half and half, making sure it's very specifically the correct amount, or it will not cure properly. And you will have toxic dice that have to go in the trash, and you never
Yeah.
touch them again. After mixing it up, takes about 5 minutes of stirring. And usually, what I do is I have Spotify on, and I will listen to 2 songs at
Okay.
least to make sure that things are fully mixed. And then I also transfer it to a second cup to make sure it's even more fully mixed because sometimes there'll be stuff stuck on the cup that is not actually mixed in properly. And I switch out to a new stirring utensil because uncured resin, unmixed up. Just double checking. And then from there, you separate the resin into different cups or whatever you need to mix those different colors up. For those dice, I believe I did clear on the base, and then I had a cup of blue and one of white using what are called alcohol inks. So they're more translucent, but they they work. And the white specifically is a bit heavier of a pigment than the different translucent colors. So what I did was I used a pipette to swirl in that white after I'd already poured in the blue and the clear to create the different patterns. Then, after you have them poured into the mold, you have to put the caps on after you let it sit for a while because you have to let the bubbles rise up. Otherwise, you're going to have probably massive voids, which still happens no matter how hard I try. And then it goes into a pressure pot for 24 hours. So it's basically this big metal thing that sits on my floor. And I also have an air compressor that's next to me right now that takes up a lot of space. And it gets pressurized to about 30 psi and just sits there and waits. Then you unmold them and pray that it all turned out okay. And it has a really thin layer of resin, usually across the whole mold, that you have to remove. Usually I do tape because it's really messy. If I don't do tape, sometimes I just kind of fling it on the floor because it's a mess in here anyway.
Might
Uh,
as well. It's your workshop.
might as well. I'm gonna have to vacuum sometime.
Right.
It'll get cleaned up. Then after that, I usually leave dice about a week before I'll sand and polish them just to
Okay.
make sure they have the time to fully harden. Because depending on what you put in them, the hardening time can change. Like alcohol inks, because of what they're made of, can make it take a little longer. Same thing if you use like acrylic paint or anything with any kind of water in it, it makes it take longer. So I just leave it in there. I have a huge backlog, so it really doesn't matter. Uh,
That's fair.
I think I have about 50 sets over there right now that are completely untouched.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you've always got steps that you can be further
Yes.
progressing on or projects in motion. That also means
Constantly.
you always have a supply as well. You're never finding yourself
Oh
without
yeah.
enough ready to go or at least close enough to ready to go
Hmm.
to do it. So the sanding and polishing part is the part that I
Yes.
find to be most people that I've talked to, most dice makers, I've said that seems to be the most tedious, but also one of the more physically straining
It
parts
is.
of the project. How long does it say to take to sand and polish a single die, just one of the entire set?
It really wouldn't take that long. It's depends on how many faces that you have to sand. So, for example, the D20, the way that I make my molds, I use what are called cap molds. So there's only one face of the die that is really that bad usually. And then you also want the ones that are surrounding it. So the D20s, I'm usually doing four, but sometimes up to 10 faces.
Yeah.
So it can take a little bit of time or a lot. I over time have switched to a mixture for sanding. So I guess there's 6 papers that you can go through. I now only do 4. What I
Okay.
do is there's the first 3 are rougher, and I do all 3 of those completely by hand. And then I have what are called vibratory tumblers. which people actually use to clean like brass. And I have this wood media and specific polish that I use, and I put them in there for a little while, and it'll do a couple papers worth of polishing for me. Then I have to do a different step that other people don't have to do of cleaning out all the polish from the numbers. They get completely filled. And that's something. But and then after that, after I've fully inked them, I do another round of polishing by hand on that last grid of paper just to give it a final shine up. But it is the most taxing part. Like I will sit in here for hours and my hand and my shoulder will be aching
Oh, I'm
just because
sure. Yeah, just the repeated, like the
the
repeat
repeated motion.
repetitive project, and like having to
Yeah.
put a certain amount of pressure on where you don't want too much or too little. It's got to be
Hmm.
so tense, in your arm and your shoulder to
It
be able to
is.
do that for as long as you need to do it, for as many sets as you need to do it.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite set of dice that you've made so far?
Oh goodness. I have a few. Usually they're all character sets that are my like mm, my favorite favorites.
Ones as you made for your character specifically.
Yeah, I actually hmm, wonder if they'll show up. But this one has a little bit. What I do sometimes when I make dice is I will save that thin layer of resin that's on top of the mold if it's a fun color, and I actually have bags full of them to use later in the dice themselves. So this one actually has a little bit of blue, a little bit of black,
Oh yeah, that's
and
showing up
then
great.
it has a little bit of silver ribbon in it
Yep.
and some like green mesh.
Oh, that's
And
incredible.
that's my favorite that I've made for myself. But my actual favorite set of dice, I think, is I did a platinum colored set that I drilled into. This is using blanks. So I drilled into those and then I wrapped chain around them,
Okay.
like a gold chain. So,
Right.
it- and then encased that in the resin with the ink numbers. They're so pretty.
That's so incredible. That is so cool. And I know that there are different sizes of dice that people make. For
Yes.
example, there's those teeny tiny mini ones, and then I've seen
Yes.
gigantic, like almost the size of a softball sized dice before. Do you usually stick with a standard size, or have you tried experimenting with the various sizes before?
I mostly have the standards.
Okay.
I have a 30 millimeter D20 that I've had for a little bit now that I've done a few different things with. And about a week and a half ago, something like that, I just got a 60 millimeter, which is a little bit smaller than a baseball, and a set of miniature dice that range from 12 millimeters down to 8. So I have them coming.
So there are a lot of techniques that I've seen
Yes.
done where I've seen like they'll place, like you were talking about the chain, wrapping the chain and then
Mhm.
embedding that in resin. Is there a technique that you want to learn that you haven't had the opportunity to experiment with, or do you have like a dream technique that you're working up towards, or have you pretty much experimented in all the styles that you want to experiment in?
There are definitely ones I want to figure out. There's one where people with these blanks will use UV resin and soap bubbles to create what kind of represents dragon scales around the dice. I haven't figured out how to do it quite yet. Also, everyone always asks about liquid cores, and I despise making them. I've tried it a few times. I would love to figure it out so that I can actually provide these to people, but it's so difficult, and they're prone to breaking, and it's a whole thing.
Do you
If I
have?
could
Oh,
magically,
go ahead. Yeah.
if I could magically figure that out, it'd be great.
Do you have any advice for people who are looking to prolong the life of their dice or to upkeep their dice? Because I know that dice do
Mhm.
get wear and tear. The edges get worn down and it can
Yeah.
adjust the way they roll to certain degrees. Do you have any suggestions for anybody who might not be looking into getting into dice making, but also might be looking
Mhm.
to like upkeep their dice or keep their dice healthy, so to speak?
Yeah, so depends on what dice you're getting, of course. Resin dice are fairly durable. I roll mine in a velvet tray just to be safe, but like, that's the main thing I think to keep them in as pristine condition as possible with rolling. In general, for design wise, to keep them as pristine as possible, you want to keep them out of prolonged sun exposure
Okay, so sun
because
exposure can
resin.
bleach them or melt them to a certain degree.
I have not seen one melt, but it can change the colors
Okay.
very dramatically.
So it'll
Like,
cause discoloration in the dice itself
yeah,
if they're in the sun too
I
long.
when I moved to where I am now, I tried to do the farmers market here for a bit in October. Specifically, it was not even full summer,
Right.
and set up, and there were sets that were very bright pink, and they turned into a very pale pink by the end of one day, and I was like, "Oh no, this is not going to work out anymore." So I only do indoor events
Are there
because
any materials that you'd want to work with that you haven't had the opportunity to work with yet?
I'd like to try using snake shed.
Okay.
I don't have a snake, so I don't have any,
Okay,
but
that
it
yeah.
looks really cool.
That's very cool. So when someone is getting into this process or wants to
Mhm.
try their hand at dice making, and like we were talking about, it can be a very expensive hobby or a very
Yes.
expensive craft. How much is a person who is wanting to get started in this looking to spend to make an honest go of it? At startup, with just basic level materials, and it can be a ballpark
Right.
estimate, but basic materials, how much would you think someone would have to spend to actually try an honest go at this?
As just a hobby, it's a lot easier
Okay.
because you don't have to pay for good masters. Um, it can be fairly cheap. So let's see. Safety equipment, respirator costs like $50, I want to say. So there's that. You're wearing a respirator. I don't care if it's a hobby. Keep your lungs safe.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
then
because
the
there's
gloves.
fumes and stuff throughout that process too. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you can't smell them, you don't trust what the bottle says. It says it's non-toxic. That's true when it's fully cured, not true when it's still liquid.
Oh wow. Okay.
Uh-huh. They're sneaky. Okay, go on about safety forever. So there's that. Um, so let's say gloves. You need a box of those. That's probably another $20, so 70. Uh, Resin in general, you can get a small bottle, like a 16-ounce bottle to start, which be around $20 on Amazon. So it's 100. Any colorants, you can get a basic pack for another 15. So 115. Cups, probably another 10. So I must say like probably 200 at least to start
Okay,
because
and
you're gonna
that's
need to
like
buy
bare
molds.
minimum, very
Yeah.
basic stuff.
Yeah, that's without being able to do the pressure pot. You're gonna have to deal with the bubble mess,
Oh wow. And how
which
much
you
does a
don't
pressure
want.
pot usually run?
Depends on if you want to do the one that works out of the box or not. I started with the ones that don't, which are cheaper. That probably about $150, but you have to spend the time to modify it
Right.
from being a paint pressure riser to being just a pressure pot. Plus, you also need an air compressor, which is another chunk of change. My current pressure pot, which works much better, was around $250, and I think around the same for this air compressor.
Yeah, so
So
it's an
it's
investment. It's
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 an
going to be an
investment.
investment. Yeah. That's incredible. So what made you decide to take this professional? What made you decide to change from a hobby or something that you were just interested in to making it into a business? Because that takes a lot of courage first off because
It did.
there's rejection in a lot of things and there's a lot of expense that comes with it. What made
Mhm.
you decide to take the leap and go the professional route?
I think part of it was because of the timing. With the pandemic happening, I didn't have anything else I was working on at the time.
Right.
And so it was I'm going to just try to do this as a job immediately. I There was no time where I was like, this is just gonna be a hobby. It was immediately, how can I make these the best that I can? And
So you went right into making it a
full
trade and a
force.
career and a
Yeah.
business. That's incredible. Like I don't think I'd ever have the confidence to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna try this thing I've never done before and invest into it fully
Mhm.
as a business. That's absolutely amazing. Did you have any desires growing up to run your own business? Was that something that you were always kind of looking out for, or was it just this specific thing that pushed you into that?
The only thing I can think of is I thought a lot when I was younger about running a combination bookstore cat cafe. Never thought it would be a real thing, but
That's
so
yeah. Everybody has
I'm
that. I think they
yeah,
have their own dream of like owning some sort of brick and mortar shop, and I think it's
yeah.
it's just time that has taught us that no, brick and mortar
Mhm.
is expensive. Online's the way to
It
go,
is
and it's
expensive. I
with
get asked
rent and
constantly if I
oh my
have one.
goodness. Yeah, just yeah. It's incredible that you had that level of confidence to do it. How many sets of dice would you say you sell in a given year on average?
Gosh, probably around 100 total
Wow,
at the
okay.
moment. It really depends on the events that I get into because I'm really bad at social media. I don't know why. If I go to post something, it takes me a solid 20 minutes to come up with a single sentence to
Right.
write, to post with it. So I just avoid it. And it's not the thing to do. Uh, I used to sell a lot of sets because I was streaming my work. And so people would see stuff as I was working on it and they'd be like, I want that one.
Oh, I
And
think that's such a cool idea though, and I definitely
yeah,
something I would encourage you to keep doing because the process is just so fascinating to me. Not just the
it
finished
is.
product, which is so cool, but because of shows like How It's Made that used to
Hmm.
be on where you find out how a doorknob is made or anything like that. I just
Yeah.
love seeing it broken down into a step-by-step process. And I think that's become more and more of a popular thing,
Hmm.
over the past decade or so, is just people are very interested in that whole
Oh, yeah.
process from start to finish. What's the most number of dice that you've made at a single time? So the most amount of
Oh,
actively going batches you've had at once.
um, I actually think that I know the most dice I've poured at once was around, I think it was 100 because I did a specific stream where I was like, I'm pouring a single die per follower I have. And so that was a lot of dice at once. But that was also when I had four pressure pots. And so it was a little easier to do that.
Yeah.
But active dice overall that I have at once, I could not even tell you how many are in this room right now. I counted before we started that I have 127 sets fully finished.
Wow. So yeah, you've got a full stock currently of sets of
Yes.
dice just ready to go. That's absolutely unbelievable, just absolutely incredible. And so I want to point people towards your website. Dragon Ink Dice can be found on Big Cartel at dragoninkdice.bigcartel.com. And there are some really, really gorgeous sets of dice on there.
Mhm.
I am trying so hard not to just go buy them all up because they are so absolutely pretty. But if you want to order some of those sets, just head on over to that website. It's very easy to go through the whole
Mhm.
process, and there are a lot of options there. But also, as a reminder, we are doing a giveaway tonight. That set of dice, that set of VTM World of Darkness dice that you see on screen right now, is available as a giveaway. Just because of tonight's stream, Katie has been so generous to offer up one of these sets to one of our followers. All you have to do is put hashtag dice me please as it is on the screen there. That's dice me PLZ into the chat, and you can be in the running to win one of those sets of dice tonight. But I definitely encourage everybody to head over and look at some of the other options as well, because there's full D&D
Mm.
sets, there's VTM sets, there's just every kind of set of dice that you can imagine, and they are so absolutely gorgeous. And I can say for sure that we have a lot of dice goblins in this community who just hoard and collect dice. Do you consider yourself a dice goblin, a hoarder or collector of dice, or is it more just you have a set of dice, you like that set of dice, you stick with it? Because I've never considered myself one, but I'm starting to get the appeal the more and more beautiful sets that I see.
Mm. Uh, I am both because I only use so many of them, but I consider all of the ones that are made to be mine, and I'm allowed to use them until someone adopts them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so you'll use a set of dice that you have ready to sell, but you'll use them just to feel them out before selling them off to somebody else
Sometimes,
sometimes. Yeah, okay.
like our last vampire session, I get yelled at because I roll so badly all the time. The amount of bestial failures or messy crits that I get is insane. So I got told that I had to use different hunger dice. So
That's fair.
I took some to test.
That's
They all
amazing.
still rolled badly for me, but it's fine.
It is fun, and honestly, failure on the dice is what makes the game fun for me. If you had guaranteed success all the time, it just wouldn't be nearly as appealing as that possibility of failure. Like, because it creates
Yeah,
some of the most unique and interesting situations. And I love
it
the
does.
element of dice being used in role playing because of the randomity it can cause, the random situations that can come about because of it, and it just wouldn't be the same experience without it. Do you have any superstitions or traditions when it comes to dice in gaming? I know some people will go through rituals with their dice, or they'll put their dice in salt to take out the bad energy, and before they have a game session or whatever the case is. Do you have any kind of interesting or unique rituals or traditions that you do with your dice?
I think the most that I do is I have them all laid out and I will roll them all first to see which ones are behaving for the night. And those ones get to be rolled first before anyone else gets to be considered. So
Okay.
they go in a line of best to worst.
Best to worst. So you just start at one
Yes.
end and see how they're doing all the way
Yes.
down into
Hmm.
that's amazing. Have you ever put dice in dice jail? Because I think this concept is hilarious, but also so unique and interesting that people will put certain dice in
Yes.
timeout. What is your
It needs
process
to
of going through
happen.
that?
If it rolls, so for D&D dice, if I get more than one, if I roll one more than once in a session, that die is dead to me for a week.
It's you
It's
just will
dead to
not
me.
touch it
I won't
until at least a
It
week
gets
has passed.
ignored. Now, if it is dice that I've made, so I use singles as well for my events, and I'll sit there and I'll roll them at the table, and if I find one that's behaving like that, I threaten to turn it into jewelry.
Amazing,
Yep.
amazing. So have you done that before? Have you ended up going that far and turning dice into jewelry before?
I do make dice jewelry. They're usually made of the ones that aren't what I consider sellable because of
Okay.
probably something that nobody else would notice other than me. Uh,
Well,
the
that's a good way
tiniest
to upcycle
imperfections.
it too, honestly. Like
Yeah,
that's a great
they're
way to make use
upcycled.
of it because you have all these disposable dice that might not have turned out the way you wanted to, but it's good to find another purpose for them rather than just turning them into
Yeah.
trash.
I also put them into now that I have the 60 millimeter, I am putting them into that die as upcycling as well.
So we actually have a new follower, Greg Zor, who said in the chat that you made
Hello,
some
Greg.
awesome soup dice for them. Now I need to hear about this. I need to
uh,
understand this.
Greg's dice are the bane of my existence, and he
Okay.
knows it.
What was the process for making these? Because dice full of soup, I that just asks or prompts so many further questions.
That set of dice is the first ones I was required to use blanks on because of how many times it failed in the process of making them. What I did was I got an actual packet of ramen, out of my kitchen and I took some of the noodles, I took some seasonings out of my kitchen. I used the actual seasoning from the ramen and mixed that into the resin with and added a teensy bit of orange. I think I had 3 failed sets before I finally was able to get one with the blanks to work.
That's
They're beautiful, but they made me really mad.
but you stuck to it, and I think
I
that's
did.
something that I admire about this craft and this art is that you won't just say, "Okay, it can't be done," just because one goes
Oh,
bad.
no.
Like, you have to almost push through and push past all of those failures to keep innovating and to keep going forward. What do you do? What encourages you to keep that kind of energy going? Like, what's your motivator to see a project through like that rather than just trying it and giving up on it?
Part of it, I just like seeing if I can do certain things. And also, I like making people happy with art. I like giving people gifts. Yes, this one was a gift. I was trying to remember. And it's always been something that I've really liked doing is gifting things. And this specifically, it was I had to do it. And I was actually on a timeline because this was I wanted to bring them to MomoCon to hand them in person. So it was a rushed thing. I learned in the process of that bacon bits cause cure inhibition. I cannot use bacon bits. I am sorry, everybody. Uh,
Okay, okay. Well, that's interesting to know because like
mhm,
there is a chemistry to it. Like there's so many
there
chemicals
is.
involved and so many things you have to consider that I wouldn't even think of like the cross contamination between something like
I
bacon bits and curing.
I don't know why. It's not like they aren't dried bacon, but I I don't control the science.
In regards to the soup dice, which I'm never going to believe I've said those words and I'm now never going to not be
Soup
able to think
dice.
about them. Do you remember what flavor of ramen it was?
It was original.
Okay.
Original chicken. Yeah.
Would you say that is the wildest set that you've made, like the most experimental set that you've made, or was there something that beat it?
Probably that one because that one also had a companion die of my first D30, which I had a handcrafted silver pot that I also put little soup pieces into and like cured with UV resin. The UV resin does make the bacon bits not cause cure inhibition.
Interesting. So that
So if it's encased in UV resin, it's safe.
that's so one resin doesn't work, but then the UV
Hmm.
resin specifically does work.
Yes.
That's crazy. Now, another thing that I've been curious about is masters, because I've heard that
Yeah.
term tossed around before. What is a master? And it sounds like it's something that has to be outsourced, something that you have to order. So, who do you go to
Yeah.
for masters, and what actually is a master?
So you could do it yourself if you are good at 3D printing shapes that have to be very specifically shaped.
Right.
I personally I've used a couple different people. The first one we don't talk anymore, but he's been excommunicated from the dice making community, so he doesn't exist.
Fair.
Uh, but I work with one group called Revel Broker. They use what's called a Formlabs 3. I believe they use what's called dental grade resin to be able to print out. It essentially looks like your regular die, but with like a clear resin.
Right.
And it has the numbers already in it. It has, if you have a logo, it'll have that in the right spot on it. And they have to go through the whole process of placing everything using 3D programming and putting, lines of supports on it in very specific places to make sure the numbers do not melt into themselves. And you can get masters of all the dice shapes. I actually have a 30 sided one.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you can get basically any
You can get
shape, any
basically
combination
anything.
you want. Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I've also seen like spiky dice where it's like the long, almost
Mhm.
like caltrop
Yeah.
looking
They're
dice.
usually like called shards or crystal dice.
Oh, that's
I do not have any of those yet.
no,
We'll
that's
see. Maybe in the
yeah, that
future.
I have seen those before, and I think that they're very, very cool. What is the most dangerous element in the dice making process? Because we've talked about fumes. I know that skin contact with resin,
Mhm.
especially in certain points, is very dangerous. What would you say is the most dangerous process, and what's the best way to be safe and preventative about it?
Those are probably the biggest overarching ones, the fumes and making sure that you don't have any skin contact with the resin. If you do end up getting resin on you that's uncured, I always keep a bottle of isopropyl alcohol and immediately just kind of pour it on myself and get a paper towel. And then I also go wash my arm or whatever if it happens. Uh,
Have
it
you
has,
experienced any injuries because of the dice making process, and what would you say is your
yes.
worst injury you've sustained?
Uh, it of course is because of the Caltrop D4s. Uh, when sanding those by hand, they become actual weapons. I have cut my hand sanding them before because of how sharp those corners and edges can get. Because of the tumbling process I use for part of it, it cuts down on that, so it's not as dangerous when you people get it.
Ugh.
But they are weapons.
Oh, I bet, especially when they've got just those really rigid, pointy edges. Like the
Yes.
D4s, that's what I always think of when I think of like people stepping on dice. That's where my brain goes to immediately. It's never D6s or any other shapes.
It's
It's always the D4s, and that just
They're
ugh.
also the only ones I ever drop. They're the only dice I ever manage to drop in this room, and then I'm afraid for my feet.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to be
I
especially
shuffle.
careful at that point because they're also one of the smallest combination of dice, so they could be buried in carpet,
Yes.
they could just disappear, and you're gonna find them only through stepping on them.
Yeah.
What
Luckily,
is
there's the carpet is not accessible in here because I have a tarp across the floor.
that's smart. That's a
Yeah.
good tip for anybody is to make
Yeah.
sure that you don't have carpet.
Get a paint drop cloth, put it on your floor, and never move it. Tape it down.
Do you have a favorite dice type or shape? So like a D20 versus a
Ooh.
D4, like do you have a specific one that you like more than any others?
I really like. I don't have them. The There's a specific kind of D12 where it's more of diamond shape. It's like a
Oh,
rhombic
interesting.
D12. They're beautiful. I love them. I want one.
Okay, okay. Is there a favorite one that you like to work on? Like one that you think is the easiest or the most fun or the most interesting? Because a lot of them seem similar in their shape, but they are a variety of shapes. Is there one that you like more
Yeah.
than any other?
The easiest to work on are the D6s just because the sanding is just so smooth. It's the easiest to hold. Um, my favorite to make though is I actually have a couple alternate D4 shapes and I find them so fun. One's like this tapered crystal shape.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I really like it.
Then that never like falls on its side to the point that you can't get to the numbers. Like it's always
Yeah. You
okay.
can always see the number
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
and it actually rolls cuz it doesn't just land like the caltrops do.
No, no, that's yeah, that's so what okay, the inking. I don't
Hmm.
have a steady hand, so I've never been super good at painting minis or anything like that. What is
Me
the inking
neither.
process like and how much focus like do you have to use a magnifying glass? Like how do you go through all that or are you able to just ink it in and then just wipe off the excess and
That
not a
one.
okay. Oh,
Well,
see that's
I
such a
just
relief.
I slather it on there and then I wipe it off on a paper towel. And then once it's dry, I will clean it with that last polishing paper.
Yeah, that oh my god, if you had to do it
It's
so
so much easier.
specifically, that seems like the best
Now,
way to do it because I
it
couldn't
is
imagine like having to paint with inside those little lines.
absolutely not.
Do you have
The
a specific brush that you use for it or are you do you like literally
um
slather and wipe?
I have, let's see, what size is this? This is a 5/0.
Okay.
It's the one I use. Small.
Yeah. So
Um
No, yeah, go ahead. You were gonna say
I
something.
was gonna say the most intense inking I've done is multicolored inking. You have to do a little more effort with that. But I still do the same process. I just pull out as many paintbrushes as I do colors, and I'll just slap the colors on, and then I wipe it off in like the direction like sideways to make sure all three colors are still there.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
But those
that
are
seems like it
fun.
would be very, very specific.
It is.
A lot of detail. What is your favorite part of the whole process? Like, is there a certain step that you look forward to most more than others, or is it just kind of the overall art that you enjoy?
Probably the most exciting part is unmolding them because you get to see how they come out. Because resin acts really weird and things will change while it's curing because the way they cure is it heats up and it can make things move around in ways you wouldn't expect sometimes. So
That's
it's always fun to see how they come out.
And do you have to worry about any things like how the pressure pot sits, or is there any issues like bumping into it might throw everything off? Like, is there anything anybody needs to be aware of if they were to start this process of like, you want to make sure it's in a stable, flat surface, or does any of that stuff kind of not really matter after that point?
Uh, Usually people prefer if you have it on a level surface. I've learned like, mine's not perfectly level, but because that's where my molds were made as well, it doesn't really affect it because it's level for that room. But
And
you probably want that. Like this pressure pot's pretty heavy. If you bump into it, you're probably the one getting injured. It's most likely not moving without a lot of force.
that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. What is the difference between the molds and the masters?
So the masters are the physical dice
Okay.
themselves. The molds are like everything's right here. Are these? So the
Okay.
little cat mold.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So originally, like I made this half first. It goes this way, and then you make the lid on top of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that you said the masters are the physical dice themselves. So what do you mean by
Yes.
that then?
So it'd be like this die is what a master looks like.
Okay. And do you put those into the molds to like make sure that they're the way you want the mold to be, or how does that work?
So for the mold making itself, I have silicone that I have to mix and cure in the same way that I do resin. So I have to mix the two different parts for making a mold. So for this D12, for example, I put a face down that I want to be the topmost face on my mold. I put it down on usually just packing tape, and I have those little cups. Those mouthwash cups are my mold housing. I cut off the bottom of them and stick it on the tape and hot glue it down, and then pour the silicone into that, and then it goes into the pressure pot for 6 hours. That's how long
Okay.
my silicone takes to cure. And then you take that out, and it'll only be that bottom half. It won't have that lid yet. And so what I will then do is I will take it out of the cup. You have to cut keys into it, so these little indents.
Yeah.
And then I had to cover this entire area with petroleum jelly so that this lid does not stick to it.
Right.
And then you like build a wall. I usually just use the tape again to build the wall for the lid. And you pour more silicone, let that cure. And then you can take that master out of here and it'll work as a mold to pour the actual dice.
Having, I would say, mastered dice making, has that encouraged you to try any other creative pursuits? Are there any other creative endeavors that you're currently looking into doing? Are you happy with dice making, or is there some other stuff that you'd also like to get into branching off from this?
I'm pretty happy doing this. I think if anything, I've started looking into different things I can learn how to do to be able to put them into the dice. Like I've made a few things out of clay, but I'm not great at it.
Okay.
I've made that singular pot that was okay. I'm pretty decent at making roses, I want to say. Like make those a lot. I learned how to do that in college, uh, weirdly enough. Or I actually shared a picture of the duck that I made with the little hat
Yeah.
on the server. So that's as far as I've gotten with my clay skills. And I'd like to learn to do more just to be able to make different things to go inside them. But also with clay, there's also you know, the weight issue. So
Right.
they're probably not the most balanced dice when they have the clay inclusions in them, but it's fine.
Well, and I've seen people get into metal working to the point that they make like
See
these
that?
metal framed dice as well. And it just seems like there's always new evolutions to be found. I've seen
Yeah.
clockwork dice, I've seen all kinds of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Is that something that you think you'd be interested in exploring, learning how to do that? Or is there any makers that you are taking cues from or that you specifically watch because you can
Mhm.
learn certain techniques from them?
There are different dice makers I definitely admire. Like, there's some amazing things out there. The metalwork, I'd love to learn how to do. I don't have a space for that right now. I'm in an apartment. I
Right.
don't think my landlords would really appreciate it if I had anything like that in here. Uh, but it would be fun. I will say I do make bismuth crystal, so I do have molten metal in this apartment on a
Okay.
regular basis. But
That's interesting.
uh,
Well, for those who want to follow along with what Katie is doing and see the different projects that are coming out, you can go follow Katie on Instagram at instagram.com/dragon_ink_dice. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile follow. I know you also have a TikTok because I tagged it when I did the
I
announcement for
I
this.
do. I just haven't posted any videos on it. I just like videos on there.
That's fair. That's fair. But you can definitely go follow on Instagram
Yeah.
and you can go support her shop, as we've talked about before, at dragoninkdice.bigcartel.com, where you can order a special set of your very own. Now, do you take custom commissions as well?
Oh yeah,
Okay. So you
for
can actually
sure.
get dice designed in any style you would like as
My
well.
favorite thing.
Well, there you go. So if you want your own personal and you want it to be Katie's favorite thing, you should get in touch with her about getting a custom set made. That being said, we have our giveaway tonight, sponsored by Dragon Ink Dice. Katie has been generous enough to donate those dice you see on screen right there in our giveaway tonight. All you have to do is put in the hashtag Dice Me Please. And I think we're getting to a point that we could do that giveaway in just a moment here, but I'm going to ask you another question before we do that giveaway. Where did the name come from? What was the motivation or the inspiration to use the name Dragon Ink Dice? Is there a story behind that?
A little bit. For one, the logo is my cat in dragon form, just so everyone's informed of
I
who
love
he
that.
is.
I love that.
Uh, so the logo that I have on the Discord with the little pencil was my original logo because I went to college originally for music and then moved on to writing, just an English degree with a minor in publishing and editing, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And so I was like, I like dragons, and it was going to be a Dragon Ink like editing, something along those lines, because I was doing commission work for a company in New York, editing books for way too little money, like 20 plus hours of work for $100 level of insanity. Some
That's
fun books, though, I will say. There's some
absolutely.
interesting ones. So originally that's what it was going to be, and I had already gotten my mascot made, and then I started doing this, and I was like, now hold on, I can just throw dice at the end
Yeah.
and get a new logo version of him with a die in his hand, and it'll be perfect.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
Are you able to dedicate your time full time to dice making, or do you still
I
have
do.
another? Oh, you do. So this is it. This is like
Oh
your full.
yeah,
That's
yup,
awesome. I'm
yeah.
so happy to hear that because you are extremely talented. Having held
Thank
a set
you.
of your dice, like they are really well made. The craftsmanship is incredible. I was so sad to have to ship them off to our last giveaway winner who got them because they are so well made, and so I'm so glad to see that you've gotten to a point that you can make it your full-time
Mhm.
career. And congratulations on that, because that is
Thank you.
one of the most terrifying things about starting your own
Oh,
business is
it's so
deciding.
scary.
Yeah, because it's a fluctuating market, like, based off the con circuit, based off of the demand and everything like that, plus the expenses. Like it's so scary, but I'm so impressed and in awe of and proud of you, and inspired by you is really the word I can think of, to be able to make it a full-time career is so admirable and so cool. Would you have any advice to anybody who's thinking of a similar creative endeavor and wants to get into, creating their own business or owning their own business? What advice would you give to them, as that is what you're able to do full time now?
Yeah, gosh, uh, do a lot of research before you start, because I would say that was a huge help to me. Like, it is not the case for most people to get to quality stuff as quickly as I did. I have an insane ability to look at something and be able to recreate it just by reading directions. And
Okay.
I do not expect that. Give yourself grace, especially if it's resin related. There's such a large learning curve. I still mess up constantly and have to throw things away because I don't want to ship out toxic items. And also, just ex- don't expect it'll go great at first, because it takes time to find
Does.
people and like to actually get to the point where you're willing to go out and do things. Is I had to convince myself that doing events in person would be the way that I needed to go, and it's so much better for me than online. I love getting to talk to people. Like, I was it's so odd how little I enjoy doing online. I'm online constantly. Like, every time you guys see me online in the server, I'm in this room probably. I could be participating in conversations. I'm just terrible at typing words to people
Well,
in,
and it'll
in
break the
general.
focus. You just get
It breaks the
distracted. You get,
focus.
yeah, brought into it. So it's just easier to lurk and just
It
be a part
is.
of the community without
I
actually
still am
actively
lurking. I
engaging.
promise I'm reading everything all the time. I'm
that
there. I'm just not saying anything.
That's amazing. So let's do the giveaway now for who
Yes.
won that set of dice from Dragon Ink Dice. Tonight's winner is Jilly Roses. So it's actually one of your fellow coterie mates who gets that set of
Wow.
dice from you. So
Wild.
I don't even have to put you two in contact.
You
You
don't.
guys
I'm
talk
going to
already.
hand them to her in Georgia. I'm not even going to
So
ship them. She can
that's
wait.
that is perfect. Congratulations to Jilly Roses. And Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. It's such an
Of
interesting
course.
conversation, and it's such a unique skill that you have. And I am so, again, impressed by your commitment. So enamored by the care and love that you put into the process, the fact that you turn out as many dice that you do, and that they're of such good quality, and you obviously love doing this, and that is all you can ask for out of a job. Is like, that's the ideal,
Yeah.
is that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, even though there's a lot of effort that goes into it.
There's
So
so much effort.
that is so incredible that you're able to do this, and I really do appreciate you taking the time with me tonight to talk about it, because there's so much that goes into it that I couldn't even begin to fathom, and you really did make it something that I could really understand. And I hope everybody who had the opportunity to watch or is listening to this later on really got something out of it, because I sure did. I really did. I really learned so much about this process. So you can go follow Dragon Ink Dice on social media at Dragon Ink Dice, or you should go to the store, most importantly, and pick up a set of dice of your own at dragoninkdice.bigcartel.com. But thank you so much to my guest, Katie, for being here tonight. I really do appreciate you. And stay tuned to all of the exciting St. Pete by Night programming coming this week. Tomorrow, we have Bloody Strings is back on for their next episode. We have Rage Across Tampa, our Werewolf the Apocalypse Chronicle, on Tuesday. On Thursday, we have Don't Get Caught. On Friday, we have What the Hell Is That, our Hunter the Reckoning Chronicle. And then we'll be back next week on Saturday for another After Dark. Also, we have our YouTube exclusive Mementos is off and running, which new episodes of that drop on Mondays only on YouTube. That's the only place you can find it. So go tune into those. But Katy, again, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. And thank you so much to everybody who watched. Congratulations to Jilly Roses. And we'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good night.